Into the Shimmer, a tale of pirates and wonder. The Tempest. Wind howled through the rigging, shrieking like a chorus of vengeful spirits as the Valiant pitched violently on the churning sea. The night was black as a captain's sins, save for the wicked flash of lightning that split the sky in jagged veins, illuminating the chaos on deck. Rain lashed the ship in torrents, soaking every man to the bone, though none had the mind to care. The sea had turned against them, and only the strong or the fortunate would see another dawn. "Hold fast, ye dogs! Secure the lines!" Captain Jonathan Blackwood roared over the deafening storm, his boots planted firm against the rolling deck. The wheel fought in his grip, jerking with every monstrous wave, but he would sooner let the sea take him than surrender control of his ship. His long coat snapped in the wind like a battle flag, water streaming from the worn fabric as he forced the helm against the howling gale. Sullivan, the first mate, fought to lash down a loose cannon, his soaked hands slipping against the wet rope. Beside him, the captain's enforcer, a burly man named Red, struggled to keep his footing as the ship lurched dangerously. "She won't hold much longer, Captain," Sullivan bellowed, wiping rain from his eyes as he staggered toward Blackwood. "She will hold!" Blackwood shot back, though even he wasn't certain. The Valiant groaned, her timbers straining as if the very bones of the ship were about to shatter. Another wave crashed over the bow, its frigid embrace sweeping Red clean overboard. The man barely had time to scream before the sea swallowed him whole. Garrick Kane, the quartermaster, clung to the main mast, his knuckles white against the slick wood. "This ain't no natural storm," he shouted to no one in particular. His fingers fumbled for the charm around his neck, an old token of supposed protection. His voice cracked with desperation. "This is a curse. Mark me words, some devil's got its claws in us." The sky cracked open with a blinding explosion of light, striking the sea off the port side. For a fleeting moment, the crew saw what lurked beneath the waves. Something vast, something ancient, something watching. The ocean roiled like a living thing, writhing in unnatural fury. Then it came. A pillar of silver light erupted from the heavens, spiraling downward in an eerie, twisting current. The glow illuminated the deck, turning men into phantoms as it danced across their terrified faces. The world seemed to still. No wind, no rain, no thunder, only a strange, ringing silence. Captain Blackwood turned to shout an order, but the words never left his lips. The world collapsed inward, and the Valiant was no more. The awakening. The first thing Captain Blackwood noticed was the quiet. Not the eerie, pressing silence of the storm's unnatural pause, nor the muffled, endless roar of the sea, but true, unbroken quiet. No creaking timbers, no lashing wind, no raging water. He inhaled sharply, expecting the sting of salt and brine. Instead, the air was thick with warmth, carrying a scent both sweet and unfamiliar. Something floral, something alive. Beneath him there was no familiar solid deck, no rocking motion beneath his boots, only the uneven give of damp sand. A groan to his left, a voice hoarse and strained. "Captain?" Blackwood's eyes snapped open. The sky above was impossibly blue, cloudless, too bright after the choking darkness of the storm. He turned his head and found Sullivan lying a few feet away, half buried in the sand, blinking blearily as he propped himself up on one elbow. The first mate looked as disoriented as Blackwood felt, his soaked clothes crusted with drying salt, his expression wary. More movement, a hacking cough, a string of curses muttered through gritted teeth. Blackwood pushed himself upright, shaking off the sluggish weight in his limbs. Around him, his crew was scattered across the beach in varying states of disarray. Some groaned as they stirred, sand clinging to their soaked clothes. Others lay motionless, unconscious but breathing. Garrick sat up abruptly, eyes wild as he clutched his chest. "We're dead," he rasped. "The storm took us, and we're at the gates of the afterlife." His breath came fast, panicked. He scrambled to his feet, swaying slightly. "No ship, no sea, just endless land. We've been cast into some demon's trick." "You're breathing, aren't you?" Sullivan grunted, shoving himself upright with a wince. He rolled his shoulders, grimacing as if testing for broken bones. Doesn't feel much like the afterlife. Garrick shot him a glare, gripping the charm around his neck. How would you know? Maybe this is some kind of purgatory. Blackwood ignored them, rising to his feet as he took in their surroundings. A vast stretch of pale, fine sand curved along the shore, stretching endlessly in both directions. The waves lapped gently against the beach, not the violent, raging sea that had swallowed them, but something calmer, too calm. And beyond the sand Blackwood's breath caught. Towering structures loomed in the distance, their sheer, gleaming surfaces catching the sun. They stood unnaturally tall, their lines too straight, too precise, not like any fortress or castle he had ever seen. They reflected the sky in great panes of glass, glittering like captured lightning. It was a city, but not one of stone and wood. His pulse quickened. The unfamiliar air, the strange architecture, it all felt wrong, as if they had awoken in a world that wasn't their own. A sudden shift in the sand caught his eye. Footprints. Not just their own, freshly imprinted, but others. Smaller, lighter, crisp, as if left only moments ago. Alongside them, strange ridges cut through the sand, forming a trail of narrow, unnatural tracks, like cartwheels, but too slim, too perfect. "Captain." Sullivan's voice was measured, but edged with something Blackwood had rarely heard from him: uncertainty. "I see it," Blackwood murmured, his fingers instinctively curling around the hilt of his cutlass. Behind him, Red, the captain's enforcer, let out a long whistle as he hauled himself to his feet, brushing sand from his coat. "Well now, this ain't the afterlife I was expecting." Then, a shrill, piercing noise split the air. The crew flinched, hands flying to weapons, muscles tensing like coiled springs. And then it appeared. Barreling down a paved road beyond the beach, moving faster than any beast had a right to, came a blindingly bright, metal-clad contraption. It roared like some great mechanical beast, gleaming under the sun, moving with unnatural speed, without a horse to pull it. Garrick let out a strangled yell and dove behind Sullivan. "Witchcraft!" Blackwood's grip tightened on his sword, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The world, it seemed, had changed. First contact. The metal beast roared past, kicking up a gust of wind that sent loose sand flying. The crew ducked instinctively, some shielding their faces, others drawing weapons, their instincts screaming at them to prepare for battle. But Blackwood stood firm, feet braced against the shifting ground, his sharp gaze locked onto the monstrous contraption as it sped away along the paved path beyond the dunes. Its wheels did not turn like those of a carriage. No beast pulled it. It moved as if by sorcery alone. Garrick peeked from behind Sullivan, knuckles white where they gripped his cutlass. "Did you see? No driver, no steed, just hurtling forward like a cannon loosed from its moorings." Sullivan exhaled slowly, shaking sand from his coat. "Aye, I saw it. I just wish I hadn't." His usual pragmatism was edged with unease. "I've no notion what that thing was, but I know this much. This ain't any land we've seen before." Blackwood was already moving, marching up the beach toward the paved road, every muscle in his body coiled tight. "Gather yourselves," he ordered. Red squinted toward the city beyond, his face alight with something closer to wonder than fear. "Captain, do you reckon they got taverns here?" Blackwood ignored him, his focus already on the path ahead. The sand ended abruptly where the hard black stone of the road began, stretching smooth and unnatural beneath his boots. It was warm underfoot, radiating the heat of the sun. Strange, manufactured. Then, movement. Down the road, a small group of figures approached. Blackwood lifted a hand, signaling the crew to hold steady. The figures walked with an easy, unhurried gait, their posture unguarded, their heads bobbing in animated conversation. 3 young men and a woman laughing amongst themselves, oblivious, for now, to the battle-worn pirates watching them with a mix of wariness and silent calculation. Garrick muttered under his breath, "They dressed like madmen." What is that? Canvas breeches? A tunic with no sleeves? No proper boots? Red elbowed him. That one's got silver chains round his neck. Think he's nobility? The group finally noticed them. The tallest of the strangers, a broad-shouldered, dark-skinned man with a peculiar piece of cloth wrapped around his head, slowed his steps. He exchanged a quick glance with his companions before flashing a wide grin. "Yo," he greeted, lifting a hand in a casual gesture. "Sick costumes, man. You all in a play or something?" Silence. The pirates stared. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "I do not understand half of the words you just uttered." The young man's grin faltered, only slightly. His gaze swept over the crew, from their worn leather boots to the cutlasses at their hips. "Dang, you really committed to the bit, huh?" Sullivan stepped forward, attempting diplomacy. His voice was careful, measured. "We mean no trouble. Only we find ourselves lost." The woman in the group tilted her head. "Lost? Like off a boat? You guys shipwrecked or something?" Blackwood hesitated, every instinct screaming that this was no ordinary misplacement. But he gave a slow nod. "Something like that." The group exchanged amused glances. Then the young man with the head wrap gestured vaguely toward the city. "Well, if you need directions or whatever, downtown's that way. Probably some tourist info spots." "Tourist?" Blackwood frowned, passing the unfamiliar term. But one thing was clear. These people did not see them as a threat, or perhaps they were simply fools. Before he could respond, Red stepped forward, curiosity outweighing caution. He nodded toward the young man's feet. "Tell me, friend, where'd you get them peculiar boots without laces?" The young man looked down at his sneakers and then back up, visibly puzzled. Foot locker?" Red sucked in a breath. "A locker full of feet?" Garrick made a strangled noise of horror. "What sort of land is this?" The young man blinked. Then he let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Man, you all are really committed to this whole thing, huh?" The pirates remained silent. The strangers gave them one last, bemused glance before moving on, shaking their heads and chuckling amongst themselves. Blackwood exhaled slowly, finally releasing his grip on his cutlass. His mind whirled. This was no ordinary place, no ordinary time. "We need to move," he said, voice low, firm. "Find shelter. Gather information." Sullivan gave a slow nod. "Aye, Captain." Garrick shot a wary glance at the city ahead, fingers still clutched around his charm. "If this is the devil's work, I want no part of it." Blackwood set his jaw, his gaze locked on the strange, towering structures in the distance. Whatever forces had cast them upon these shores, one thing was certain. They were in uncharted waters, into the unknown. Blackwood strode forward, his boots striking firm against the scorching pavement where sand met road. The heat rising from the ground was unnatural, baking through the soles of his boots with an intensity that reminded him of the sun beating down on the deck of the Valiant at high noon. The air, too, was heavy, thick with a mix of salt and strange, cloying scents that neither belonged to the open sea nor the familiar rot of a harbor. Behind him, the crew followed, their steps hesitant, eyes darting between the impossible structures ahead and the monstrous carriages. Metal beasts, really, that thundered past on roads as wide and smooth as rivers of stone. Sullivan walked beside him, his fingers twitching near the hilt of his cutlass. "Captain, this place, it ain't natural." "Nothing about this is natural," Blackwood muttered, gaze fixed on the towering buildings ahead. They loomed like jagged cliffs, unnervingly uniform, gleaming in the sunlight. "But we must make sense of it." Behind them, Red had slowed, distracted by a glint of metal near the pavement's edge. He crouched, plucking up a dented aluminum can. He turned it in his hands, frowning. "What do you reckon this is? A relic? A trinket of some kind?" Garrick shot him a withering look. "It's refuse, you fool." Red sniffed it and recoiled. "Smells like a tavern floor." "Aye, after the ale's gone sour." Sullivan grunted. Blackwood ignored them, his focus sharpening on the city ahead, until something caught his attention. A lone figure stood at a crossroads where the road forked, juggling 3 bright orbs with effortless precision. The man was unlike the others they had encountered. He wore a fitted vest over a loose shirt, sleeves rolled up, as if he had only just finished a task of great amusement. A silk scarf was knotted at his throat, and his long dark hair was pulled into a careless tie. But it was his eyes that held Blackwood's attention, keen, knowing, glimmering with something unreadable. The orbs danced through the air in a perfect rhythm. As the crew hesitated, the man caught each one in turn, let out a slow whistle, and clapped his hands together. "Well, well," he drawled, voice smooth as a well-played card trick. "What do we have here?" Blackwood took a measured step forward, shoulders squared. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head, a smile teasing at the corner of his mouth. "Who am I? More interesting question might be, who are you?" Sullivan's fingers curled tighter around his weapon. "We're not here for games." "Shame," the man said, sighing theatrically. "I do like a good game." He took a casual step closer, his gaze sweeping over them like he was committing every detail to memory. "Let me guess. A wayward band of sailors, lost on a most peculiar shore." Garrick bristled. "How do you know that?" The man chuckled, catching one of the orbs with a lazy flick of his wrist. "Oh, I make it my business to know things." He spun the orb once, then sent it soaring into the air again, catching it behind his back without looking. "Call me Finn." Blackwood studied him. There was an ease to his stance, a confidence that was too knowing, too assured, like a man who had seen this all before. "We need information," Blackwood said, his voice measured. "Where are we?" Finn spread his arms wide. "Why, you're in Miami, of course." Garrick let out a strangled breath. "Aye, well, that's about as useful as a compass with no needle." Finn smirked. "You'll find there's plenty to discover here, if you know where to look." Blackwood narrowed his eyes. "And you'd be willing to help?" Finn grinned, tossing the orb into the air once more. "Oh, Captain, I'd love nothing more. Strange alliances." Finn flicked the juggling ball into the air one last time, caught it with a flourish, and tucked it into his pocket as though sealing a magic trick. The pirates remained rigid, watching him with the wary eyes of men who had braved storms, cannon fire, and the treachery of the sea, but nothing quite like this. Blackwood's shoulders squared, his stance unwavering. "If you've knowledge of this land, you'll share it." Finn's grin widened, flashing a row of sharp white teeth. "Share it? My dear Captain, I'd be delighted. But I must say, you lot are putting on quite the show. I wasn't expecting a performance like this in broad daylight." He inclined his head slightly, drawing Blackwood's attention to the small crowd gathering at the plaza's edge. Onlookers whispered among themselves, some pointing, others lifting their peculiar little boxes, devices the pirates had already come to distrust, as though capturing the moment in some unnatural way. Blackwood ignored them. "We're no actors," he said, voice clipped. "We need passage, shelter, and provisions." Finn rocked back on his heels, tapping a finger against his chin in exaggerated thought. "Ah, the classics. The lost sailors seeking port. A tale as old as time." His eyes gleamed, flickering between amusement and something deeper. "Tell me, Captain, do you have coin for such things?" Sullivan scoffed. "We've coin." He patted the pouch at his belt. "Hard-earned silver." Finn's brows lifted. "That so?" He extended a hand, palm up. "Indulge me." Sullivan loosened the drawstring and fished out a single coin, pressing it into Finn's waiting grasp. Finn turned it over between his fingers, his expression flickering between curiosity and quiet amusement. The coin was old, its surface worn, but heavy with the weight of true silver. He rolled it across his knuckles with practiced ease, watching how the metal caught the light. "Well," he mused after a moment, "I hope you weren't planning on buying much with this." You might find the local merchants hesitant. Garrick scowled. Ain't coin worth something everywhere? Finn flipped the coin back, and Sullivan caught it with a sharp glare. Coin, sure. But this? Finn tapped his temple. This is history. He gestured towards the towering buildings beyond, where bright signs flickered in unnatural hues and distant music pulsed from unseen sources. This city doesn't run on doubloons and treasure chests, my friends. You're in a whole new world now, he said, playing along with the supposed act. Blackwood's jaw tightened. He had already suspected that this place was too different, too strange, but hearing it confirmed set his teeth on edge. And how do you propose we acquire their currency? He asked, voice even. Finn's grin returned, sharp and knowing. Ah, now that's the right question. He clapped his hands together and studied them anew, tilting his head as if weighing an opportunity. Lucky for you, Miami appreciates a good spectacle. He nodded toward the onlookers, who had grown bolder, some creeping closer, murmuring excitedly. I'd say you're already halfway to making a fortune. Red brightened. You mean we can trade in entertainment? Finn's eyes twinkled. If you play your cards right. Sullivan exhaled sharply, patience wearing thin. And what do you gain from this? Finn spread his arms wide, voice dripping with theatrical charm. Why, the satisfaction of seeing an extraordinary tale unfold. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The pirates exchanged glances, each gauging the situation in their own way. Finn was a stranger, unpredictable, but he knew this world. More importantly, he seemed willing to help, or at least he found them amusing enough to entertain the idea. Blackwood made his decision. Then we play their game, he said at last. He turned to his crew, his voice carrying the weight of command. We learn, we adapt, and we survive. Finn's smirk deepened. Now that sounds like a story worth watching. The cost of survival. The wind carried the scent of salt and something unfamiliar, roasted, spiced, mingled with the unnatural tang of smoke that curled from the strange metal contraptions speeding past in the distance. Sullivan didn't trust this city, nor the way it moved. It was too fast, too loud, and too unpredictable. And yet, Finn fit within it, like a man who had always belonged, drifting with the shifting tides of its chaos. The pirates stood in a loose formation at the plaza's center, muscles tense, hands never straying too far from their weapons. The crowd, still lingering at a cautious distance, whispered among themselves, watching with fascination. Some clutched their strange little boxes, capturing moments in ways the pirates couldn't yet understand. Finn, seemingly unaffected by their unease, tossed one of his juggling balls into the air, spinning it before catching it with effortless precision. His smirk never wavered. Blackwood exhaled sharply. If it's coin we need, then let's have it done. What's your scheme? Finn's grin widened. Scheme? Captain, you wound me. He swept a hand toward the open space around them. Miami is a city of opportunity, my friends. You just have to be willing to perform. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. And by perform, you mean? Finn turned on his heel, spreading his arms wide as he addressed the onlookers. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice rang out, rich and theatrical, cutting through the murmur of the plaza. At once, eyes locked onto him, drawn by the sheer magnetism of his presence. He turned back to the pirates, his expression unreadable, yet knowing. I think we're about to find out. Before Blackwood could object, Finn took a grand step back and gestured toward them. Feast your eyes upon the most dedicated troupe of method actors this city has ever seen. A band of true mariners, lost in time, here to bring you the most immersive experience of old-world piracy imaginable. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Garrick's face darkened. We ain't actors, he muttered, fingers twitching near his cutlass. Sullivan placed a steadying hand on his arm. Hold. Finn continued, his voice a perfect balance of charm and showmanship. Watch as they showcased the true art of the sailor's life. Sword play, sea shanties, and the commanding presence of men who once ruled the waves. He turned back to Blackwood, his eyes glinting with amusement. Unless, of course, you'd rather spend the night without a roof over your head. Blackwood's jaw tightened. He loathed the idea of making fools of themselves before these land dwellers, of being reduced to mere spectacle. But the weight of their reality pressed down like a cannonball to the chest. Shelter, food, survival. He had no choice. With a slow exhale, he turned to his men. Sullivan, Garrick. His voice was sharp as steel. Show them what real blade work looks like. Sullivan hesitated only a fraction before stepping forward, rolling his shoulders. Garrick grumbled under his breath but followed suit, drawing his cutlass with a practiced flick. They squared off in the center of the plaza, muscles coiled, their bodies settling into the familiar stance of men who had fought not for sport, but for their lives. Sullivan struck first, his blade slicing through the air in a silver arc. Garrick countered, their swords clashing with a burst of ringing steel. There was no drunken brawling, no clumsy swings. This was skill, honed by years on the deck of a rolling ship. Each movement was precise, calculated, a dance of deadly efficiency. The crowd gasped. Then came the cheers. The glow of their devices flickered in the evening light as they captured the spectacle. Not to be left out, Red threw back his head and launched into a sea shanty, his voice carrying over the plaza. Oh, we set sail on the ocean blue, with gold in our sights and a ship so true. Laughter rippled through the onlookers, but amusement quickly turned to enthusiasm as more and more began tossing paper bills and coins into an upturned tricorn Finn had conveniently placed on the ground. Blackwood watched, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He still hated this, hated playing to the amusement of those who had never known the sea, who had never felt the thrill of battle or the weight of true danger. But the evidence was undeniable. They were earning their keep. Beside him, Finn leaned in, voice just low enough for only Blackwood to hear. See? His tone was laced with quiet satisfaction. You're surviving, and isn't that what pirates do best? Blackwood said nothing, but his grip on his sword tightened. A pirate's pay. Coins clattered into the upturned tricorn, their dull metallic plinks swallowed by the city's relentless hum. Red's shanty rang out, his voice rich and unwavering, carrying an energy that wrapped around the crowd like the call of the tide. At first hesitant, the onlookers now swayed in rhythm, some even clapping along, awkwardly at first, but with growing enthusiasm. Sullivan and Garrick's blades wove a sharp, deliberate dance, steel flashing under the midday sun. What had begun as a reluctant display had transformed into something far more natural. Instinct took over, their movements honed by years at sea, their footwork precise as they circled each other like predators testing the limits of their skill. Then from the crowd, a boy no older than 10 darted forward, his small hands clutching a folded bill. He hesitated only a moment before dropping it into the hat, his face alight with wonder. Are you guys real pirates? Blackwood, watching from the edge of the spectacle, took a slow step forward. His presence cut through the noise like the shift in the wind before a storm. His coat billowed slightly, his boots settling firm against the pavement as he loomed over the boy. When he spoke, his voice was low, edged with mystery. What do you think, lad? The boy's breath hitched. He stared up at Blackwood, eyes round with possibility, as if he had stumbled into a storybook come to life. Then, with a delighted gasp, he spun back to his mother, tugging at her sleeve with frantic urgency. Mom! They're real! The woman laughed, indulging his excitement, though her gaze lingered on Blackwood with a mix of amusement and uncertainty. She fished a few more crumpled bills from her purse and dropped them into the hat before leading her son away. More money followed. Coins, bills, paper folded so casually it suggested wealth. The spectacle had become a lure, and the crowd was now well and truly hooked. Finn scooped up a bill and gave a low whistle. Now this is promising. He flashed it at Blackwood, grinning. Welcome to the world of legal plundering, Captain. Blackwood eyed the unfamiliar currency warily. How much? Finn's fingers moved, counting with the efficiency of a man who had done this many times before. Couple hundred, easy. With an effortless flick, he tossed a few bills toward Sullivan, who caught them mid-motion without missing a beat in the duel. Garrick, not to be outdone, snatched his share mid-swing and tucked it into his sash in one fluid motion. Finn smirked. Fast hands. I like it. The performance had taken on a life of its own. More spectators gathered, their voices rising with excitement. Some shouted requests, challenges for a duel between the captain and his first mate, others demanding tales of high-seas adventure. Blackwood's sharp gaze swept the crowd, his instincts prickling. Too many eyes. We can't linger, he muttered under his breath. Finn tilted his head, considering, before stepping forward and spreading his arms wide. And that, dear audience, concludes the first act of the greatest pirate performance you'll ever see. But fear not, we will return. A chorus of groans met his words, but applause quickly followed. Coins and bills still rained into the hat as the crew moved to collect their earnings. Sullivan sheathed his blade, rolling his shoulders with the ease of a man shaking off tension before the next fight. We best move, he murmured. Garrick smirked, tucking away his cutlass. Aye, before they start asking for proof of buried treasure. Blackwood cast one last glance at the crowd before turning away. Their survival had just begun, and already the city was watching. A strange kind of tavern. The door swung open with a soft chime, and Blackwood stepped inside, immediately assaulted by a scent both rich and alien. Roasted beans, something sweet, and a sharp bitterness that curled in the air like cannon smoke after a broadside. He froze just past the threshold, nostrils flaring. This was no tavern. No scent of rum-soaked wood, no tang of brine or sweat, no raucous laughter punctuated by the clatter of tankards. Instead, there was something precise about the space, calm, calculated. The air buzzed with a low hum, a quiet murmur of voices over the occasional whir of unseen machinery. The crew filed in cautiously behind him. Red nearly tripped over the threshold, his wide eyes darting to the ceiling, where lights hung in delicate fixtures that cast a warm, steady glow. No lanterns, no flickering flames. The walls bore framed images, but not paintings. No brushstrokes, just perfect, unnatural clarity, as though someone had bottled a moment in time. Sullivan moved with careful deliberation, his stance straight-backed, his gaze sharp as he scanned the unfamiliar battlefield. Garrick, however, hovered near the entrance, his grip white-knuckled on his cutlass hilt. The city had already thrown more than its share of witchcraft at them, but this quiet, unnatural den, where glassy-eyed patrons sat cradling steaming cups like sacred relics, unsettled him in a way the chaos outside had not. Finn, as ever, strode ahead without hesitation. "Pick a table," he called over his shoulder. "I'll handle the magic potions." Blackwood narrowed his eyes but said nothing, leading his men toward an empty booth near the back. The seating was strange, too soft, almost yielding. He hesitated before lowering himself onto the cushioned bench, his posture stiff with suspicion. Sullivan eased down with measured grace, but Red collapsed into the seat with an audible gasp, his fingers pressing into the material like he expected it to vanish beneath him. Garrick remained standing. "What in the devil's name is this place?" Sullivan murmured, his gaze flicking from table to table. Most of the patrons paid them no mind, their attention fixed on small, glowing objects in their hands. Some tapped them absently, others stared as though reading, though no pages turned. A few sat in quiet conversation, their postures relaxed, unguarded. Blackwood muttered, watching them. Men too lost in their own world to mind the waters around them. Finn returned a moment later, balancing a tray with the ease of a practiced hand. He slid into the seat across from them, his smirk never fading as he pushed steaming drinks toward each pirate. Blackwood eyed his own warily. The liquid was dark, nearly black, housed in a fragile ceramic vessel instead of a proper tankard. He nudged it with a finger, noting the heat that radiated through the material. "And this?" "Coffee," Finn said, already taking a sip. "Strongest brew they've got." Red inhaled deeply, then took an eager gulp, only to seize up as if struck by a lightning bolt. His eyes shot open, his entire body jerking upright. "Captain!" he gasped, clutching his cup with both hands like a relic of the gods. "This be some kind of wizard's elixir," Finn snorted. "Yeah, that's the general consensus." Sullivan took a more measured sip, his brow lifting slightly at the bitter, unfamiliar taste. Garrick, however, barely glanced at his own before nudging it aside like it might lunge at him. Blackwood lifted his cup at last. The scent alone was enough to awaken something in his senses. He took a slow, careful sip, and warmth spread through his chest, curling through his thoughts with sharp clarity. The taste was bold, bitter, but not unpleasant. It was the effect that unsettled him, the sudden sharpening of his mind, like the sea clearing after a storm. He lowered the cup, setting it back on the table with deliberate thought. Finn leaned in, his grin sharp with amusement. "So, Captain, now that you're well-fed and properly caffeinated, what's next on the grand pirate agenda?" Blackwood exhaled slowly through his nose, fingers drumming once against the table. The day had been madness, a relentless tide dragging them from one impossible shore to the next. And yet, somehow, this moment, the warmth of the drink, the low murmur of voices, the steady presence of his crew, felt like the first moment of solid ground, a pause in the storm. At last, he met Finn's gaze, his voice steady, unwavering. "We need lodging." Finn's smirk deepened. "Lucky for you, I know a place. A deal for lodging." Finn led them back onto the streets, where the city pulsed with an unnatural energy. Lights flickering, metal beasts roaring past, and the air thick with unfamiliar scents. The pirates, though warmed by coffee, remained on edge. Garrick walked stiffly, his cutlass within reach, while Sullivan studied the towering buildings with quiet calculation. Red had abandoned caution entirely, his wide eyes jumping from one marvel to the next, muttering under his breath about sorcery and unnatural lanterns. Blackwood, ever composed, took it all in with the patience of a man who knew the sea could throw worse things at him. This city, though foreign, was just another battlefield, one he would learn to master. Finn turned a corner, leading them to a quieter street, lined with squat, weathered buildings. Above the doorway of one, a flickering sign read, "Ocean Breeze Motel," its faded blue letters buzzing weakly. "This," Finn said, sweeping his arm toward it, "is your new temporary kingdom." Blackwood studied the building. It wasn't a captain's quarters, but it had walls, a roof, and, more importantly, no immediate signs of a trap. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit and smelled of stale air. A television hummed softly from behind the counter, where a man in a wrinkled polo shirt scrolled through one of those strange glowing rectangles the city folk clung to. "Hey, Miguel," Finn said, slapping the counter with a practiced ease. "Got any rooms open?" Miguel barely glanced up. "You paying cash?" Finn turned to Blackwood, who in turn ordered the crew to pitch in from their earnings. Miguel exhaled slowly. He wasn't unaccustomed to strange clients, but something gnawed at him as he counted the bills. Blackwood's expression remained unreadable. "Is it enough?" Miguel hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Yeah, that'll do." His voice was carefully neutral, but there was something behind his eyes. Curiosity. Maybe fear. He pulled a set of keys from behind the counter and slid them across. "Pleasure doing business." As Blackwood retrieved the keys from the desk, Sullivan gave an approving nod, while Garrick remained near the door, watching the exchange like a wary sentry. Red, who had been side-eyeing the buzzing television, leaned toward Finn as they turned. What sort of magic do you reckon that glowing box runs on? Finn smirked. Wi-Fi and disappointment. Garrick muttered something under his breath, refusing to acknowledge it entirely. The room. Finn led them up the metal staircase, the pirates' boots clanking against the rusted steps. The structure swayed just enough under their weight to make Garrick tense, his grip tightening on the railing. "This be safe," he muttered. Finn shot him a grin over his shoulder. "Mostly." At the top, he unlocked the door and pushed it open with a creak. The room inside was cramped, the air thick with the scent of stale carpet and something artificial, like citrus, but wrong. The walls bore faded floral wallpaper, peeling at the corners, and the furniture was sparse. 2 beds, a rickety wooden table, and a crookedly mounted television that buzzed faintly in the silence. A single bulb flickered above, casting uneven light. Blackwood entered first, sweeping the space with a practiced eye. Tight quarters. Red hesitated before flopping onto one of the beds. The moment his weight hit the mattress, he lurched upright, staring at it like he'd just sat on a sea serpent. He pressed his hands into the surface, watching it sink slightly beneath his touch. "This ain't right," he muttered. "Beds shouldn't swallow a man whole." Sullivan nudged the other mattress with his boot before sitting down carefully. He didn't relax. Strange, but not the worst place we've been. Garrick remained in the doorway, his stance rigid. It's too still. No ship sway, no boards groaning underfoot. His fingers hovered near his cutlass, as if the room itself might attack. Finn tossed the keys onto the table and leaned against the wall. "Yeah, well, unless you want to sleep in an alley, this is the best deal in town. Welcome to land life." Blackwood shot him a look that could have split timber. "We are sailors, not drifters." Finn held up his hands, smirking. "And now you're sailors with a roof." Sullivan moved to the window, pulling back the flimsy curtains. The city sprawled below, neon and movement, the streets alive with flashing lights and the endless hum of cars. His brow furrowed. "This place never sleeps." "Reckon it never needs to," Red muttered, still eyeing the mattress warily. Blackwood took the lone chair at the table, fingers steepled, his gaze distant but sharp. "We rest for now." His tone left no room for debate. "At first light, we find answers." Garrick hesitated a moment longer before finally stepping inside. He shut the door behind him with a solid click, testing the lock twice before giving a slow nod. For the first time since waking on this strange shore, they had walls around them. It wasn't home. It wasn't even safe, but it would do. For now, the bathroom. Incident. The steady sound of running water continued from the bathroom, an unremarkable noise to Finn, but a growing concern to the pirates. Garrick's sharp gaze flicked toward the closed door, as if expecting some unseen danger to emerge from within. Red was still glaring at the lamp, his distrust now spread evenly across the entire room. Then came a sudden curse, a heavy thud, and the unmistakable sound of a body colliding with tile. The door burst open, and Blackwood staggered out, dripping wet, eyes blazing with fury. His coat clung to him, soaked through, and his usually tied-back hair hung in damp strands around his face. Water trailed behind him in uneven splashes across the carpet. Finn, lounging on the bed, pushed himself up on his elbows, blinking. You okay?" Blackwood jabbed a finger towards the bathroom. "That contraption," he exhaled sharply, trying to maintain his dignity, despite looking like a half-drowned cat, "attacked me." Sullivan and Red both took cautious steps away from the bathroom door, as if whatever had assaulted their captain might decide to come for them next. Finn was already smothering a laugh. "Attacked you?" Blackwood bristled. "I twisted the knob, as I've done on 1,000 barrels of water, yet it spat at me from above like a scorned woman's slap, with heat no less." Finn's lips twitched. "Ah, the shower." Blackwood narrowed his eyes. "The what?" Sullivan, ever the brave one, peered into the bathroom with careful steps. his hands hovering near his belt, like he expected to draw a weapon at any moment. Inside, the showerhead still dripped water, betraying no signs of aggression. The floor was slick, puddles forming near the drain where Blackwood had clearly lost his footing. "It don't look like a trap," Sullivan offered hesitantly. "It was," Blackwood snapped, wringing water from his sleeve. "And it succeeded in its ambush." Finn finally let the laugh slip, shaking his head. "It's not a trap, Captain. It's plumbing. You turn the wrong knob, you get hot water instead of cold. It's supposed to do that." Blackwood's glare did not waver. Supposed to scold a man? Supposed to knock him off his feet? Finn stood, rubbing his face with one hand. "Not if you use it properly." He walked past them and flicked the shower back on, adjusting the temperature until it was a comfortable lukewarm. "See? One side's hot, one side's cold. You find a balance." Blackwood eyed it with heavy suspicion. "A ship's bath should be a basin and a bucket." "Well, you're not on a ship," Finn pointed out. Garrick, who had been silent up to this point, finally scoffed. "Aye, but this world is looking more treacherous than any storm." Before Finn could reply, a loud knock at the door cut through the moment. Garrick was on his feet instantly, hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Blackwood, still dripping, turned with a scowl. Finn, sighing, moved past them and swung the door open to reveal the motel manager. Clipboard in hand, face pinched in annoyance. "I've had 6 complaints," the man snapped. "Banging, shouting, somebody yelling about a fire demon in the bathroom." His gaze flicked between Finn and the soggy pirate captain. "Whatever's going on, it ends now. You're out." Blackwood's jaw clenched. "We paid for the room. You're leaving, now, or I'm calling the cops." Finn exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Guess we're homeless." Red crossed his arms. "Good. I don't trust this place." Finn shot him a look. "You're not helping." The manager stepped aside expectantly. Finn slung his bag over his shoulder, then jerked a thumb toward the hallway. "All right, pirates, pack it up. You're coming with me." Garrick frowned. "And where are you taking us?" Finn smirked. "Looks like you're all rooming with me for now." The television incident. Red had wedged himself firmly into the corner of the couch, arms still crossed, his posture stiff with deep-seated distrust. Sullivan sat at the edge of the armchair, one foot tapping against the floor in idle agitation. Garrick lingered near the window, peering out with the occasional glance toward the bathroom door, as if expecting another outburst from Blackwood at any moment. Finn, meanwhile, had taken up the remote. Click. The television roared to life. The reaction was immediate. Sullivan shot to his feet, one hand flying to his cutlass. Red nearly toppled off the couch entirely, gripping the armrest like a man holding on for dear life. Garrick whirled around, his own hand hovering at his waist over his pistol. The screen blazed in brilliant color, depicting a sweeping landscape of golden grasslands. A lion prowled forward, golden eyes gleaming, its muscles rolling beneath its tawny fur. The deep, authoritative voice of the narrator rumbled through the speakers. "The African savanna is home to some of the most formidable hunters in the animal kingdom." Red, still clutching the couch, jabbed a finger toward the screen. "What manner of sorcery is this?" Finn barely held back a grin. "It's not sorcery. It's a TV." Sullivan's eyes darted between Finn and the screen. "There's a beast in the box." "It's not in the box. It's..." Finn sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It's like a painting that moves. Moving pictures. Like a play, but filmed." Garrick narrowed his eyes. "I've seen painted scenes on the walls of a chapel, but ne'er one that lived." "It's not alive," Finn tried again. But the words bounced off their skepticism like cannonballs off reinforced hulls. On screen, the lion lunged at an antelope, the chase unfolding in vivid detail. The camera zoomed in, capturing the predator's coiling muscles, the desperate sprint of the prey, the dust rising in golden plumes beneath their feet. Red's grip on the couch tightened. "That's real?" Finn hesitated. "Yes, but also no." "Which is it?" Sullivan demanded. his free hand gesturing sharply at the screen. Finn exhaled. It was real when it was filmed. Now it's just a recording of something that already happened, like a memory you can watch. The pirates exchanged glances. Garrick folded his arms, his stance skeptical but thoughtful. So this is but a captured moment, played back like a sea shanty passed through the crew? Finn nodded. Exactly. Red finally loosened his grip on the couch, but still eyed the screen warily. I still don't trust it. Sullivan, however, had inched closer, his eyes fixed on the television with something bordering on fascination. His fingers twitched slightly, as if resisting the urge to reach out and touch the moving images. Finn smirked. Want to see something else? Without waiting for an answer, he flicked the channel. The screen blinked, then returned with an explosion of color. An animated cartoon featuring a talking dog in a detective's outfit, chomping on a comically large sandwich. The pirates' reactions shifted instantly. Distrust gave way to sheer, unfiltered bafflement. Sullivan pointed at the screen, his expression incredulous. That beast speaks. Finn grinned. Yeah, this one's not real. A long silence followed. A shrill ringing erupted from the small device on the table. The reaction was almost expected at this point. Sullivan had his cutlass halfway out before Finn even had time to move. Garrick's knife had appeared from somewhere. Finn wasn't even sure where it had come from. Red, still gripping his drink from earlier, tensed so hard his knuckles whitened around the glass, as though debating whether to down it or hurl it at the offending object. The ringing continued, sharp and insistent. Garrick's grip on his weapon tightened. That thing's screaming. Finn sighed and reached for the phone. Don't touch it, Red barked, pushing half out of his seat. Finn froze, giving him an incredulous look. It's just a phone. A what? Sullivan demanded, his blade still partially drawn. A phone. Finn picked it up, flipping it over in his hand. It lets people talk to each other over long distances. Garrick narrowed his eyes. A messenger bird in a box? Finn pinched the bridge of his nose. No birds involved. Before they could object further, he tapped the screen and answered the call. Hello? The pirates tensed. A voice crackled through the speaker, muffled to the pirates, but perfectly clear to Finn. Hey Finn, you still coming by later? All three pirates took a step back. Sullivan's free hand curled into a fist. Garrick's scowl deepened. Red's eyes darted from the phone to the corners of the room, as though expecting an invisible man to step forth. Finn exhaled through his nose. He could feel their skepticism radiating like heat off sun-baked planks. Yeah, he answered casually. Might be a bit. Red jabbed a finger at the phone. Where's the man? Is he in there? Finn barely held back a laugh. No, he's somewhere else. The phone just lets us hear each other. Garrick crossed his arms, unimpressed. Sorcery. It's not... Finn cut himself off, then threw up his hands. You know what? Fine. It's sorcery. A mighty, magical rectangle that lets people talk from afar. Sullivan scoffed, sheathing his cutlass with a sharp click. No magic I trust. The voice on the other end kept talking, oblivious to the disbelief radiating from the pirates. Finn turned slightly away from them. Yeah, I'll explain later. Got my hands full. He ended the call and set the phone down. Silence. Red eyed the device warily. So a man can speak through it, and you can hear him. Yep. But you can't see him. Nope. Sullivan scowled. I don't like it. Garrick cracked his knuckles. And you say this is common? Finn nodded. Yeah, everyone has one. The pirates exchanged uneasy glances. Red exhaled slowly, then shook his head. I need another drink. The carriage without horses. The night air was thick with the scent of salt and gasoline as Finn led them out onto the street. The city hummed, distant engines, snatches of laughter, the occasional blare of a horn. Lights pulsed in the distance, their glow reflecting across the rain-slick pavement like eerie, shifting constellations. The pirates moved cautiously, their boots clicking against the sidewalk, eyes scanning the unfamiliar landscape with wary precision. They had survived the strange drinks, the unnatural brightness of the city, the disembodied voices from the phone. But this was something else entirely. Finn pulled a set of keys from his pocket and pressed a button. A sharp chirp cut through the night. A car parked at the curb responded with a flash of light, as if waking at Finn's command. The reaction was immediate. Sullivan stepped back so fast, he nearly tripped, his hand flying to his cutlass. Garrick tensed, weight shifting, fingers brushing the hilt of his knife. Red remained still, but his gaze flicked to Finn with deep suspicion. "What in the blazes was that?" Sullivan demanded. Finn smirked, stepping up to the driver's side. "Relax, it's a car." Red exhaled sharply, folding his arms. "A what?" "A car," Finn repeated, amused by their mounting unease. "It's how people get around." Garrick's gaze remained fixed on the machine, his head tilting slightly. "Where are the horses?" "There are no horses." Silence. "Then how does it move?" Sullivan pressed, his grip on his sword unrelenting. Finn opened the door and gestured inside. "Magic." Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "I don't like your tone." Finn grinned. "All right, fine. It's an engine. Runs on fuel, turns the wheels. Look, just get in. It'll make sense once we're moving." The pirates hesitated. Garrick was the first to approach, stepping toward the vehicle with slow, deliberate caution. He ran a hand over the metal frame, fingers tracing its smooth, cold surface, as if testing for a hidden seam or a concealed mechanism. "This is a carriage," he muttered, brows furrowed. "More or less. Feels like armor." Sullivan scoffed. "Ain't no carriage I ever seen. No horses, no reins, just..." He gestured vaguely at the car. "A big iron box. Looks like a trap." Red gave Finn a long, measured look. "You're certain this thing won't kill us?" Finn shrugged. "Pretty sure." Garrick exhaled through his nose and finally reached for the door handle. Finn had to stop himself from laughing when Garrick yanked too hard, nearly ripping the door off its hinges. The others followed with begrudging reluctance, though Sullivan made a point to inspect every inch of the vehicle before lowering himself inside. Finn slid into the driver's seat, shutting the door behind him. The pirates settled in with varying levels of discomfort. Garrick sat stiffly, like a man awaiting execution. Red leaned back cautiously, fingers gripping the seat like he half expected it to swallow him whole. Sullivan, however, remained on high alert, his sharp eyes locked onto the dashboard, as though daring it to try something. Finn turned the key. The engine roared to life. Sullivan swore. Garrick's hand shot to the hilt of his sword. Red flinched, his fingers clenching into fists. Finn barely contained his laughter. Instead, he put the car into drive and pulled away from the curb. The moment they started moving, Garrick seized the handle above the door. "What sorcery is this?" "It's not sorcery. The ground is moving too fast," Red muttered through clenched teeth. "I don't like it." Sullivan's glare deepened. "You're telling me everyone rides around in these cursed machines?" Finn nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "Yep." Sullivan stared at the city whizzing past, jaw tightening. Then flatly, "That's madness." The car hurtled down the street, its tires whispering against the asphalt. Streetlights flickered past in golden streaks, their glow bouncing off wet pavement. The city stretched wide before them, a maze of towering structures and neon signs. But to the pirates, it may as well have been a battlefield. Garrick's grip on the door handle was turning his knuckles white. "This ain't right," Sullivan muttered, bracing his boots against the floor like he expected it to fall away beneath him. "The land ain't supposed to move like this." "It's not the land," Finn said, struggling to keep a straight face. "It's the car." Sullivan shot him a withering glare. "It's unnatural." Garrick exhaled sharply, eyes locked on the blur of the city outside. "We're moving faster than a galloping horse." "Much faster," Finn confirmed. From the back seat, Red finally spoke, his voice calm but laced with unease. "And how do you stop it?" Finn tapped the brake lightly. The sudden deceleration sent them all lurching forward. Sullivan swore, clutching the back of the passenger seat. "Give a man some warning, damn you." Finn grinned. "Relax. I know what I'm doing." "That makes one of us," Red muttered darkly. Outside, the city moved in a blur. Towering buildings, figures pacing the sidewalks, metal beasts flashing by on wheels. The pirates barely breathed as more vehicles roared past in both directions, their headlights sweeping across Finn's car in brief, blinding bursts. Then another car zipped ahead of them. Garrick stiffened. "There's another one." Finn sighed. "Yeah, that happens." Sullivan turned in his seat, watching as more vehicles sped past. "They're everywhere." "Of course they are. People need to get places." Sullivan's frown deepened. "And walking ain't good enough for 'em. Not when you have this." Finn tapped the steering wheel. Garrick barely heard him. His sharp gaze was fixed ahead, body tense. Something was wrong. Then suddenly, "Look out!" Garrick lunged, grabbing the wheel. The car jerked violently to the side. Tires screamed against the pavement. A horn blared. Finn fought for control, heart pounding, as another vehicle whipped past, its driver throwing a furious middle finger out the window before vanishing into the night. Finn wrenched the car back into its lane and twisted toward Garrick, eyes wide. "What the hell was that?" Garrick was still gripping the wheel, his chest heaving. "You weren't stopping!" "Because the light was green. That means go." Garrick turned to him with pure disbelief. "Lights don't give orders." "They do here." Sullivan exhaled through his nose, pinching the bridge of his fingers. "This world makes no damn sense." "Agreed," Red muttered. Finn gritted his teeth and refocused on the road, muttering, "You're all gonna give me a heart attack." "Then we're even," Sullivan grumbled. "I'm already halfway to the grave, riding in this cursed contraption." Finn smirked. Then, out of pure mischief, pressed the gas just a little harder. The shriek of sirens cut through the night air. Finn glanced at the rearview mirror. Flashing red and blue lights spun like beacons of impending doom. "Well, that didn't take long," he muttered. Sullivan twisted in his seat, eyes narrowing. "What in the hell is that sound?" "The law," Finn said, flicking the turn signal. Red's hand went straight to his cutlass. "We're under pursuit?" Finn sighed. "Not exactly." The loudspeaker blared. "Pull over immediately." Sullivan's expression hardened. "That was a command." "It was." Garrick's fingers hovered near his belt. "Are they hostile?" "No." "Then why are they chasing us?" Finn shot him a look. "Because someone yanked the wheel and nearly got us killed." Garrick, entirely unrepentant, crossed his arms. "That light meant to stop us." The sirens whooped again. Finn steered toward the curb. "Trust me, this is not the kind of trouble we want." The moment the car stopped, the patrol vehicle pulled in behind them, its doors opening in sync. Two uniformed officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts. Garrick leaned toward Finn, voice low. "They're armed." "They're cops. They carry weapons." "Best not give them reason to use them then," Sullivan muttered. Finn sighed and rolled down the window as the first officer approached. A tall man with a square jaw and the face of someone who had seen things. "License and registration." Finn forced a smile. "Of course, officer." He reached for the glove compartment, moving deliberately slow. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Red's fingers twitch, his body coiled like a man waiting for battle. "Easy," Finn murmured under his breath. Garrick, still watching the officer, leaned in slightly. "What does he want?" "Proof that I can legally drive." Garrick frowned. "They don't just let you." "Nope." The officer peered into the car. "Everyone doing okay in here?" Sullivan grunted. "Not particularly." Finn shot him a warning look. "We're fine, officer." The cop's gaze flicked to Red's belt. "What's with the swords?" Finn chuckled, keeping his tone light. "Props. We're coming from a historical reenactment." The officer raised an eyebrow. "That so?" "Yep." The other officer shone a flashlight into the back seat. Sullivan scowled at the intrusion of light, shielding his eyes. We being accused of something? The cop studied him for a long moment. Depends. You've got 4 guys dressed like 18th century pirates in a sedan. Not exactly the usual crowd. Finn shrugged. What can I say? We take our hobby very seriously. The officer sighed, rubbing his temple. You been drinking? Nope. No drugs? Nope. The cop exhaled, then exchanged a glance with his partner. A long silence followed. Finally, the officer shook his head. All right, keep it safe out there. Finn gave him his best law-abiding citizen nod. Absolutely. The officer hesitated, still watching them like he wasn't quite convinced. But eventually he turned and walked back to his car. Moments later, the patrol vehicle pulled back onto the street and disappeared into the traffic. The second they were gone, Sullivan let out a slow breath. That was too damn close. Red flexed his fingers. Felt like a test. Garrick scoffed. If it was, we passed. Finn just shook his head, pulling back onto the road. Barely. A pirate's displeasure with fast food. The golden arches loomed ahead, glowing against the darkened sky like a beacon of questionable promises. Finn pulled into the drive-through lane, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he rolled down the window. Inside the cramped car, the pirates eyed the brightly lit menu board with deep suspicion. Garrick scowled. What in blazes is this? A place to eat, Finn replied. Sullivan leaned forward, squinting at the pictures of neatly stacked burgers and oversized soda cups. Where's the cook? Finn smirked. Inside. Then why aren't we inside? Blackwood asked, arms crossed. His deep voice carried an edge of impatience. Because, Finn said, this is a drive-through. You order from the window, they hand you your food, and we eat in the car. Red scoffed. That's absurd. Blackwood grunted in agreement. A man should see his meal prepared. A crackling voice interrupted them. Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order? Garrick flinched, hand flying to his cutlass. Who in the devil's name just spoke? Finn sighed. Relax. He turned back to the speaker box. Yeah, can I get 5? Sullivan cut him off. No, we'll not be eating mystery meat. Tell them we want fish. Finn arched a brow. Fish? We're sailors, Sullivan said, as if this explained everything. Fish is proper fare. Finn turned back to the intercom. All right, 5 fillet-o-fish meals. Would you like to make those combos? Sullivan's eyes narrowed. What's a combo? Finn smirked. It comes with fries and a drink. Red frowned. Fries of what? Finn ignored him. Yes, combos are fine. Please pull to the next window. Finn eased the car forward, while the pirates exchanged skeptical glances. Blackwood adjusted his hat, unimpressed. Strange way to procure a meal. A teenage employee slid open the window, blinking at the odd group crammed inside the car. Your total is $28.75. Finn handed over his card. The pirates watched with rapt curiosity. Garrick frowned. Where's the coin? Finn tapped the card on the reader. This is the coin. Sullivan scoffed. A scrap of wood? Plastic, Finn corrected. Money works different now. As the receipt printed, Blackwood leaned in, studying the boy behind the counter. And where's this lad's musket? Finn blinked. Why would he have a musket? He's a merchant, is he not? Blackwood asked. Does he not fear thieves? The employee paled. Finn forced a grin. Don't mind them. They're history enthusiasts. The kid nodded slowly and shut the window, though his eyes lingered on them as if committing their faces to memory for a future crime report. A moment later, another employee passed over a grease-stained bag. Finn took it and set it between the seats. The car filled with the smell of fried food. Red wrinkled his nose. That doesn't smell like fish. Finn smirked. Welcome to fast food. Garrick pulled out a sandwich, poking at the bun like it might retaliate. Why is it so soft? Just eat it, Finn said. Blackwood took a cautious bite, chewed and grunted. "I've had worse." Sullivan turned his sandwich over, inspecting it like a jeweler appraising stolen gold. He took a slow, deliberate bite. His face remained unreadable. Red, however, took a single bite and immediately scowled. "This is not fish," Finn chuckled, pulling the car back onto the road. "Get used to disappointment. The harsh reality of an empty purse and a long road to employment." Finn's cramped apartment was a far cry from the ships and taverns the pirates once called home. The mismatched furniture groaned under their weight as they sat scattered around the dimly lit room. The glow from a street lamp bled through the blinds, casting long shadows across the walls. It felt almost like the flickering lanterns below deck, except this ship wasn't moving, and the air smelled of stale takeout instead of salt and gunpowder. Sullivan set his half-eaten sandwich down on a coaster, eyeing it as though it might turn against him. Red had already pushed his meal aside with a disgusted grunt, muttering about fish imposters. Garrick, ever cautious, prodded at his fries, half expecting them to leap up and attack. Blackwood, the only one who hadn't outright abandoned his meal, wiped his hands on a napkin and turned his calculating gaze toward Finn. "We need gold." Finn smirked. "Good luck with that." "We had gold," Garrick muttered, "till it was misplaced." His sharp glance landed on Finn, who pretended not to notice. Sullivan sighed and rubbed his temples. "This world is absurd. People live in great stone towers, eat strange food handed to them through holes in walls, and yet somehow coin is still king. Some things never change," Blackwood said. "If we're to survive here, we'll need income." The weight of the statement settled over them. Once they had been captains, cutthroats, men of power. But here, they were just four displaced souls, broke, adrift, and utterly out of place. Red cracked his knuckles. "Fine, we take what we need." Finn snorted. "Try that, and you'll be in jail by morning." He pushed off the counter and gestured vaguely to the world beyond the apartment walls. "This isn't the 1700s. You want money. You work for it." The pirates exchanged uneasy glances. The very notion of earning their keep instead of taking it was almost offensive. Garrick scoffed. "What work would suit a pirate in a world without ships?" Finn tilted his head, considering. "Well, that depends. What are you good at?" Blackwood sat forward, his gaze like a knife's edge. "You mean to say we must each find an occupation?" "Unless you want to sleep on park benches," Finn said. Sullivan leaned back, arms crossed. "And what kind of work would even take men like us?" Finn grinned. "Let's find out."